Hey guys, it's Lotus and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to continue on with our read-along of Urha. Let's jump right into it. Chapter 32. This venerable one will baby you a bit. Will that do? Warning, blood and injury care. Behind the mirage of lotus leaves, Moran stood appalled and unmoving as if he'd been struck by lightning. Something inside him shattered, and it showed in the cracked expression on his face. Shock, indignation, jealousy, and irritation exploded like fireworks in his head. He moved his lips, but no words came out. He didn't even know what he was raging over. Only one thought ran through his mind. How dare anyone else touch that which had been claimed by this venerable one? Chuaning, you two-faced cheating whore! You dare? You dare to? He forgot that Chuaning of this era had no intimate relations with him at all. In that moment, all sense left his mind. It had been 10 years, a lifetime, from birth to death, after all. He could set it aside and maintain control when he was lucid, but under these circumstances, with his head in disarray, he subconsciously felt that Chuaning was his. Only now did he realize just how clearly he remembered even the taste of Chuaning's lips, to say nothing of the passion and desire as they entwined, the ecstasy that ate at his very being. After he'd been reborn, he did everything he could to not think about those things. But now, seeing Chuaning's naked back, that familiar figure with broad shoulders and long legs, taut muscles, and a slender but strong waist submerged in the clear water, all the memories and emotions he tried so hard to suppress rushed back without warning. Even Moran's scalp went numb. His body, too, reacted to these things. It was the kind of involuntary reaction so fierce that he could do nothing to stop it, and his lower body burned as he watched. By the time he realized what he was doing, he was already raising his voice angrily and shouting, Chuaning! Chuaning actually had the gall to ignore him? It was hard to see the two people supporting his shoulders because of the mist settled in on top of the lotus pond, so he couldn't make out their appearances, but they stood extremely close to him, the distance between them barely distinguishable. Moran hollered and barged right into the pond, wading through the water towards Chuaning. And as he grew closer, he realized... Those two people were actually golems made of metal and cedar wood. Even worse, it seemed like they had been using the lotus pond to transfer energy to Chuaning, and Moran had broken the spiritual bounding field when he recklessly rushed in the water. He wasn't sure what kind of array Chuaning was using, but he was in an unconscious daze and leaning against the golems as light continuously poured through their palms into the wound on his shoulder. Looking back on the situation, he was clearly in the middle of healing himself. When Moran rushed through the boundary, the light dispersed. To his horror, the array actually started to reverse. As soon as the light scattered, Chuaning's wound began to quickly eat away at itself. He frowned, letting out a noise of discomfort, and coughed up a mouthful of blood. Then, all the scars on his body began to tear open again. The blood that poured out drenched the pool red in an instant. Dumb Husky, what are you doing? Moran was dumbfounded. This was Chuaning's flower spirit sacrifice technique. He realized that he might have made a grave error. Chuaning's spiritual energy was of both the metal and wood element, and of elementals. Metal element spiritual energy, including Tianwen, was used for offense, while wood element spiritual energy was used for healing. The flower spirit sacrifice technique was one such. Chuaning could manipulate the spiritual essence of flora to mend wounds. However, if anyone else was to enter the array during this process, the flora spirits would immediately scatter, and not only would there be no healing effect, it would conversely worsen the injury. In the worst case, the flora spirits could even devour Chuaning's spiritual core. Fortunately, Moran had a passing familiarity with the flower spirit sacrifice technique from the last lifetime, and he acted immediately to cut off the flow of energy. Having lost the support of the golems holding him up, Chuaning tipped forward. Moran caught him and held him steady. Shizun's unconscious face was pale, lips blue, body as cold as ice. Without thinking about much else, Moran lifted him out of the pool. Half carrying and half dragging, he took Chuaning back to his room and placed him on his bed. Shizun! Shizun! He called several times, but Chuaning didn't move so much as an eyelash. He looked no different from the dead, save for the shallow rise and fall of his chest. Seeing Chuaning like this reminded Moran of the past. Inexplicably, he felt his throat close up and his heart start to panic. In his past life, 2 people died in his arms, Shimei, Chuaning. One was the love of his life, whom he thought about day and night. The other was his mortal enemy, whom he had entwined with for a lifetime. When Shumei died, Mo Weiyu disappeared from the world, and when Chuan-ning died? Moran didn't know. All he knew was the feeling of the person in his arms slowly growing colder and colder on that day. He didn't cry, nor did he laugh. Joy and sorrow both grew out of reach. When Chuan-ning died, Mo Weiyu no longer knew what the world even was anymore. By the candlelight, he saw Chuan-ning's bare torso. Usually, Yu Heng of the night sky wore clothing that showed as little skin as possible. He wore high collars and wrapped his belt sash around 3 times, a picture of dignity and propriety. Because of this, no one even saw what kind of injury those 200 strikes had left on his body. Even though Moran had seen the wounds on Chuan-ning's back with his own eyes on the day of the punishment, all he knew was that his flesh had suffered severe damage. Seeing Chuan-ning on his feet and walking around like normal in the days afterwards, he thought it couldn't have been that bad after all. Now he realized that Chuan-ning's wounds were far worse than he had imagined. The 5 wounds left by the ghost mistress were torn open, and in the worst parts he could see all the way through to the bone. Chuan-ning probably never asked anyone to help him change his bandages and try to do everything by himself. The salve wasn't evenly applied, and the places he couldn't reach were already infected and festering. Not to mention all the blue-purple bruises from the rod strikes. They spread out across his entire back, leaving no part of his molted skin unbroken. On top of them, the torn scars from the spiritual rebound earlier washed his back in blood. It flowed ceaselessly, drenching the sheets under him in red. If Moran hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he would never have believed that the man who had insisted on wiping down pillars near the bridge and creating a huge barrier to shield disciples from the rain was this same man in front of him, whose wounds were so severe and terrible he belonged in an infirmary, under intensive care. If not for the fact that Chuan-ning was unconscious, Moran would have really liked to grab his collar and shake him, demanding, "Chuan-ning, what the hell is wrong with you and your stupid pride? What's anyone going to do if you show a little weakness for once in your life? Why are you so effing stubborn? You're a grown man, and you won't even take care of yourself? Treat yourself a little better. Why didn't you ask anyone to help you dress your wounds? How come you'd rather make golems to use your stupid healing system than to just open your mouth and call for help? Chuan-ning, are you an effing moron?" As he cursed him in his head, he worked quickly to staunch the bleeding. Then he drew a pail of warm water and wiped the blood from Chuan-ning's back. Sterilizing a knife in the flame, he set about cutting off the flesh that had completely decayed. At the first cut, Chuan-ning groaned in pain, body jerking. Moran held him down and muttered heatedly, "The hell do you have to groan about? Gonna curse me out? If you utter another sound, I'll stab this knife right through your chest. You won't feel a goddamn thing once you're dead. Problem solved." It was only now that Moran could let his real, vehement nature show through, yelling at him like he did in the past. But there were too many wounds that had festered, the skin gone white and dead. Chuan-ning breathed heavily as he hacked away at it little by little. Even unconscious, this person stifled his voice and refused to cry out in pain, but he broke out into a cold sweat, drenching the body that had just been wiped clean. After what felt like hours, Moran finally finished applying medicine and bandaging the wounds. He helped Chuan-ning into some robes, then found a thick quilt and laid it over his feverish Shizun, and only then did he sigh in relief. Remembering Madame Wang's medicine that was still sealed in a paper bag, he got up and brewed a bowl of medicine, carrying it back to Chuan-ning's bedside. "Come on, time for your medicine!" With one hand, he lifted the sleeping person up into his arms and leaned him against his shoulder. He used the other to bring the bowl of medicine to his lips, lightly blowing the steam off and taking a sip to test it first. Moran grimaced and made a face. Ugh, so bitter. Still, he let it cool off and fed it to Chuan-ning, but he only got half a spoonful in before Chuan-ning couldn't handle it and coughed it all out, getting most of it on Moran's clothes. ... He knew that Chuan-ning didn't like bitter things, so much so that it could be said he hated bitter things. But Yu Heng Elder was stubborn as a mule. If he was awake, he would definitely endure it and drain the whole bowl in one gulp without complaint. At most, he'd discreetly sneak a piece of candy afterwards. Unfortunately, Chuan-ning was currently unconscious. There was nothing to be done about it. It's not like he could lose his temper at an unconscious person. He just had to suck it up and patiently feed him small mouthfuls, even using a towel to wipe the corner of his mouth at times. Something like this wasn't difficult for Moran. After all, in his past life, there was a period of time when he'd fed medicine to Chuan-ning like this every day. Back then, Chuan-ning had tried to resist him, so he would slap him across the face before seizing him by the jaw and pressing their lips together roughly, tongue pushing past to ravish his mouth, the coppery scent of blood. In an effort to stop thinking about that as quickly as possible, the last few spoonfuls that Moran fed him were a little rushed, and most of it ended up being coughed up again. Then he laid him back down on the bed and tucked him in none too gently. "I'm doing this out of the generosity of my heart. Don't you dare kick this quilt off in the night, or you're already feverish and you'll catch a cold." Halfway through his speech, his temper suddenly flared up and he kicked the leg of the bed. "Whatever. Why should I care if you catch a cold or not? I hope you do. I hope it's terrible and you die from it." He turned around and stalked off. He got to the door, but had a feeling he still couldn't put it to rest. So he turned back and squinted into the room. After figuring out what was bothering him, he went over and blew the candle out. Then he left again. This time he got all the way to the lotus pond. Seeing the flowers that had grown and bloomed after absorbing Chuanning's lifeblood, the irritation in his heart only worsened. He was filled with aggravation, but still marched stiffly out of rhythm with arm and leg on the same side moving together, back into the bedroom. Clanking like a rusty old golem, he dragged his feet in a circle around the entire room until he finally, reluctantly, came to stand at Chuanning's bedside. He's also kind of like a tsundere, like he's like, "I'm not gonna take care of you anymore," and then he came back. Moonlight shone in softly from the half-open bamboo window, illuminating Chuanning's peaceful face. His lips were pale and his eyebrows were slightly drawn together. Moran considered it for a while, then shut the window for him. They live in a humid place, after all. It isn't good for health to leave the window open while sleeping. After doing this, Moran put his foot down and swore, "If he comes back through that door one more time, he will be a dog." Just as he reached the doorway, he heard a thump. Chuanning actually tossed the entire quilt off of himself. ... What's he gonna do about this person's habit of throwing off his covers when he's sleeping? So that he wouldn't be a dog, the 16-year-old Emperor Taxianjun endured the situation with much tolerance and left. He will not go back on his word. He absolutely will not go back through that door again. So, after a while, the brilliant and powerful Emperor opened the window and vaulted into the room that way. He came through the window instead of going through the door. He picked up the quilt off the ground and laid it back over Chuanning. Hearing Chuanning's pained, labored breathing and seeing his back shuddering where he was curled into the corner of the bed, Moran couldn't muster up any of the anger he usually held toward him. He could say "serves you right" all he wanted, but his heart still ached for him. He sat by Chuanning's bedside, keeping watch to make sure he doesn't throw the quilt off again. Late as it was, with the long day Moran had had, the exhaustion finally settled in. His head slowly drooped and he dozed off. This sleep wasn't restful in the slightest. Chuanning kept tossing and turning, and Moran could hear him groaning under his breath through the haze of slumber. In his hazy light sleep, Moran couldn't tell what hour it was, or when he had ended up lying next to Chuanning on the bed, hugging the trembling man in his arms. Still half asleep, he held him and gently stroked his back, murmuring, "Shh, shh, pain, pain, go away." In his sleep, Moran felt as if he had returned to the Shishong Peak in his past life, to the empty, somber Wushan Palace. After Chuanning's death, he never slept holding anyone ever again. Whether because of the burning resentment or lingering feelings, thinking about those emotions in the endlessly cold days of loneliness afterwards made his heart hurt. Wishful thinking consumed him. But no matter how hard he wished for it, Chuanning wasn't coming back. He had lost the last flame of his life. Moran held Chuanning the entire night. Between the dreams and the haze of sleep, at times he knew clearly that he had been reborn, yet felt as if he was still in his past life at others. Suddenly, he was almost afraid to open his eyes. He was afraid that when he woke up in the morning, it would be to a cold, empty pillow and drafty curtains, and for the rest of his life, he would be utterly alone. He was certain that he hated Chuanning, but, holding him in his arms, he felt wetness gather at the corners of his eyes. This was a warmth that the 32-year-old Cha Xianjun once thought he would never have again. "Wanning, you'll be okay." It was in this hazy state, stroking the hair of the man in his arms as if he were the Moran of the past, that such a tender phrase escaped his mouth. He was so tired that he didn't realize what he had said, or what he'd called the other person. The words slipped out naturally, and he didn't think much of it. Moran breathed out and fell into a deeper slumber. The next morning, Chuanning's eyelashes fluttered as he slowly came to. Because of his strong cultivation, the high fever he had last night already receded. Chuanning idly opened his eyes, mind still foggy with sleep, but when he tried to get up, he found that there was someone else lying in bed with him. Mo Wei Yu? He was startled to say the least. Chuanning paled, but couldn't for the life of him remember what happened the night before. Even worse, his movements woke Moran up too. The young man yawned, youthful face lightly flushed from sleep. He squinted into the morning light, glanced over at Chuaning and said vaguely, "Ah, let this venerable one sleep for a little longer. Since you're already awake, why don't you go make me egg and meat kanji?" Oh no, he's in so much trouble. ... What kind of nonsense was this? Sleep talking? Moran's mind was still fuzzy. When he saw that Chuaning was not getting up to make him breakfast, he didn't press the matter. Instead, he smiled lazily and reached out, holding Chuaning's face closer and pressed a chaste kiss to his lips. If you don't want to get up, that's fine too. This venerable one will just have the most terrible dream, innit? Never mind. He sighed, hugging the person who had gone stock still by this point. He rested his chin against the head of the man in his arms, muttering, "Chuaning, let me hold you a little while longer." Oh no, what's gonna happen? Author's notes. Candy, candy, candy. That candy that you asked for. About why Moran calls him Wanning. It's not a slip of the tongue. He really called Shizun this later in his past life. As for why he would address him with such intimacy, to be continued in, don't know how many chapters later, runs away. Oh wow, so in chapter 32, Moran decided to tend to Chuaning's wounds, and he kept telling himself, I'm not gonna help him. I don't care about him. But then 5 minutes later, he'll always walk back to like cover him again with a quilt, or like treat his bandages. And then he ended up falling asleep with him, cradling him in his arms because Chuaning was in pain from the wounds. Oh no, but Chuaning woke up before him, and Moran accidentally called Chuaning from his past life. What's gonna happen? Chuaning's gonna be so angry. Please, Shizun, please don't be too hard on him. Please don't use Tianwen on Moran. He's just a dumb husky. Okay, next chapter. Chapter 33. This venerable one is off to fetch his weapon. Chuaning was so shocked by the sudden kiss that he couldn't even process what Moran was saying. It all sounded like a distant murmur to him, as if a heavy rain had started to pour down against his head. Moran, on the other hand, obliviously muttered a few more words and fell back to sleep. ... Chuaning wanted to shake him awake, but there was a high-tongue tree swaying in full bloom outside the window. Just as Chuaning lifted his hand, a light pink flower petal landed gently on the tip of Moran's nose. Moran rubbed his nose a little in discomfort, but was sleeping so sweetly that he didn't wake up. The arm Chuaning stretched out to shove him changed its course, for no reason discernible to himself, and picked up the flower petal between his fingers to examine it. As he lost himself in thought staring at the petal, something slowly came back to him. He remembered that yesterday, Moran had dressed his wounds and fed him medicine. Afterwards, Moran held him in his arms, gently stroking his hair and back long into the night and whispering softly into his ear. He remembered? Chuaning was baffled. That had to be a dream, right? The tips of his ears went red, the bright color not unlike the high-tongue petal between his fingers. The scolding words died in his throat. He really didn't even know how to start. How did you end up in my bed? Wait, this is Chuaning speaking. Okay. How did you end up in my bed? That sounds like a young maiden who had made a mistake. Get the hell out. Who let you sleep here? That sounds like a she-devil who had made a miscalculation. How dare you kiss me? If one really thought about it, it was only the touch of 2 lips. Compared to that time in the illusion, it could barely even be called a kiss. Making a fuss out of it would only make it look like he really did have something to hide. Oh, poor Chuaning. Yu Hung Elder, at a complete loss, could only roll over and bury his face into the quilt. His slender fingers grasped at its corner in irritation and embarrassment. In the end, he decided to pry Moran off of himself, sit up and get immaculately dressed first, and then shake the other awake. And so, when Moran blearily opened his eyes, the sight that greeted him was that of Yu Hung Elder sitting on the edge of the bed with an unreadable, chilly look on his face. He broke into a cold sweat immediately. Shizun, Chuaning responded expressionlessly. You broke my forest spirit boundary yesterday? I didn't mean to. Forget it. Chuaning said curtly and waved his hand like it was nothing. You should get up. Morning classes. Moran was about to lose it. He scratched his head in agitation. How did I fall asleep here? You look tired. Chuaning was perfectly calm. Doesn't look like you got much rest yesterday. He glanced at the medicine on the table and said, In the future, don't barge into Red Lotus Pavilion on your own. If you need something, tell me in advance. Yes, Shizun. You may leave. Tao Xianjun felt like he'd narrowly escaped death, and hurried to run as far away as possible. After he left, Chuaning lay back down on his bed and lifted his arms up, stretching out his hand. From the space between his fingers, he watched as the radiant blossoms outside of his window drifted and fell like snow in the wind. The soft colors of the high-tongue petals were just like the hazy memories of last night. Delicate, hard to distinguish truth from wishful thinking. He decided that he'd rather die before ever bringing up what happened yesterday. It was far too embarrassing. Well, at least he let Moran off the hook. Yuheng Elder cared about his pride above all else. He'd rather save his face than his life. So the next time Moran saw Chuaning a few days later, Yuheng Elder was elegant and composed in the usual manner, white robes billowing gracefully. Neither of them brought up that night, but sometimes when their eyes met, Moran's gaze seemed to linger on Chuaning a bit longer before habitually chasing after Shimei. And what about Chuaning? As soon as his gaze met Moran's, he would turn away immediately and coldly. But then, when he thought Moran wasn't looking, he would steal another glance as if entirely by accident. Shui Zhengyong quickly found out about Chuaning's punishment. As expected, the master Shisheng Peak was protective to a fault, and immediately threw a fit. But he couldn't rightfully direct it at anyone in particular, and could only close his door and sulk by himself. If he had known that this would happen when they first made the rules, he would have added one more. The rules don't apply to the elders. So, Shui Zhengyong likes to play favorites, huh? Madame Wang steeped a pot of tea and spoke soothingly with Shui Zhengyong for quite a while before he finally calmed down. He said, Yuheng Elder is really too stubborn. If he tries to do this again in the future, please help me talk him out of it. The sects of the upper cultivation realm couldn't even beg him into joining them. But such an eminent cultivation master ended up suffering like this over here? How am I to live with myself? Madame Wang sighed. It's not that I didn't try. You know how he is. Stubborn to a fault. Shui Zhengyong said, forget it. Wifey, give me some of those painkillers and tissue regrowth medicines you've made. I'm gonna go check on Yuheng. The white one is to be taken orally. The red one is for applying externally. Madame Wang gave him 2 small porcelain bottles, then said, Ronner mentioned that Yuheng Elder's been wiping down the lions in Naihei Bridge lately. You should be able to find him there. Shui Zhengyong tucked the bottles into his pocket and rushed over to the Jade Bridge. Chuaning was indeed there. It was shortly past noon. The disciples were all busy practicing their cultivation, and few people passed by Naihei Bridge. Chuaning stood alone on the gentle curve of the bridge, his figure tall and straight. Leaves rustled softly on the shores. His white robes amongst the graceful bamboo was a picture of refinement. Shui Zhengyong walked over grinning. Yuheng Elder, watching the fish? Chuaning's face turned his way. Sect leader must be joking. This river connects to the yellow springs of the underworld. There is no fish. Haha, just pulling your leg. You're all elegance, no humor. I really worry about how you're gonna find a wife. Chuaning, ... Here, medicine. My wife made them. Take the white one orally. Apply the red one externally. Super effective. For you. Chuaning didn't want it at first, but seeing how proud Shui Zhengyong was, as if his wife's medicine was the most precious thing, he couldn't refuse, so he accepted with a mild thanks. Shui Zhengyong was a crude man, but he was rather more reserved in front of Chuaning and did not simply blurt things out. He thought for a bit before settling on a topic. Say, Yuheng, the spiritual mountain competition is coming up in 3 years. Young talents from every sect will gather to vie for the top. What do you think Munger and Ronner's odds are? Chuaning replied, 3 years is a long time. I can't say at the present. But right now, Moran lacks the drive to improve, and Shui Meng is overly conceited and prone to underestimating his opponents. Neither has the right attitude. His words were blunt and cutting, straight to the heart of the matter. Shui Zhengyong was a little embarrassed, mumbling, Aiyah, they're just young. Chuaning said, they've already come of age, not young anymore. Shui Zhengyong, you're not wrong, but still, they're not even 20 yet. I can't help being a little biased as their father and uncle, haha. Chuaning, an undisciplined child is the fault of a neglectful father and an irresponsible teacher. If the two of them end up walking the wrong path in the future, that blame will fall directly on you and I. How will you be biased then? Silence. Chuaning continued, does the sect leader still remember Lin Yi Rufeng's sect's 2 darlings of the heavens some years back? Shui Zhengyong's heart dropped at the mere mention. 20-some years ago, there were a pair of brothers from Rufeng's sect, the foremost sect of the upper cultivation realm. The both of them were immensely gifted and exceedingly skilled at a young age. By the age of 10, they could each individually take down 100-year-old demons, and by 15, they were already capable of devising new spells and even starting their own sect had they so desired. But the cultivation world wasn't big enough for the both of them. The brothers were both far too exceptional, and eventually ended up falling out with one another. At the spiritual mountain competition that year, the younger brother even stole the older brother's secretly developed technique and was censured by all sects and scorned by every elder for it. As soon as the competition ended, the younger brother was immediately punished by their father. His pride couldn't bear it. Henceforth, he bore a deep grudge and cultivated an unscrupulous methods, and in the end became a crazed monster. To bring this up now, Chuaning was undoubtedly trying to remind Xue Zhengyang that Xue Meng and Moran may be exceptional, but the heart was far more important than skill. Unfortunately, Xue Zhengyang was hard on himself, serious with his disciples, but hopelessly addled when it came to his son and his nephew, to the point of spoiling them. So he didn't really take Chuaning's words to heart, only laughing as he said, "They won't end up like those brothers with Yu Heng Elder guiding their way." Chuaning shook his head. Human nature is set, not so easy to change without tremendous resolve. Xue Zhengyang couldn't help but feel a little uneasy at Chuaning's words, unsure if they had a hidden meaning. He hesitated for a while, before ended up asking after all, "Yu Heng, don't get mad, do you perhaps look down on that dumb nephew of mine?" Chuaning hadn't meant that at all. The unexpected misunderstanding caught him so off guard that his words choked up in his throat. Xue Zhengyang continued worriedly, "Actually, I don't really care if they come out on top at the competition or not. It really wasn't easy on him. It really wasn't easy for him growing up. It can't be helped if he's a little difficult or disobedient. I hope you don't dislike him for having been raised in an entertainment house. He's all I have left of my Da Ge. I can't stop feeling guilty for not having been there for him all those years." Chuaning interrupted him. "Sect leader is mistaken. I do not look down on him at all. If I minded his background, I wouldn't have accepted him as a disciple." He spoke directly and certainly. Xue Zhengyang was relieved. Good. Chuaning's gaze fell back to the river currents coursing beneath the bridge, surging and crashing, and said no more. Unfortunately, the conversation between them and Chuaning's confession were swallowed up by the billowing waters, just like in the previous lifetime. That he did not dislike or look down on Moran, but was never heard by a third person. 3 months of confinement passed by. This day, Chuaning called his 3 disciples to the Red Lotus Pavilion and said, "Since your spiritual cores have now stabilized, I've called all of you here today to take you to Dawning Peak, where you may attempt to summon your own weapons." Both Xue Meng and Xinmei's eyes widened, their faces ecstatic. Dawning Peak was a sacred mountain located in the upper cultivation realm, thousands of feet tall, cliffs steep and phantomless. According to legend, Dawning Peak was where Go Chen the Exalted once forged weapons. Go Chen the Exalted, the god of weaponry, oversaw the northernmost and southernmost ends of the heavens and controlled all the weapons of the world. During the Heavenly Emperor's war to rid the realm of demons, Go Chen the Exalted forged the first true sword of the world, using the mountains as the material, the seas as the smelting pool, and his own celestial blood as the forging flames. This sword pierced the heavens and the earth alike, and with one strike split the land to pieces and caused the seas to flow in reverse. Wow. Sword in hand, the Heavenly Emperor suppressed the demon race beneath the earth, henceforth unable to rise up, using only 2 strikes. Those 2 strikes cut horizontally across the human realm, rending a pair of deep gashes into the earth. After the war, the skies wept and ghosts howled through the nights. Flooding and desolation plagued the realms as torrential rain poured down for 1,000 years, filling the pair of gashes, which became the Yangtze and Yellow rivers that nurtured countless lives. And Dawning Peak, the birthplace of the Holy Sword, hence became a sacred place, with many cultivators making pilgrimages there too. Even now, the spiritual energy left behind by the ancient gods remains strong there, and countless mysterious creatures roam the mountains where all kinds of peculiar flora thrived. Dawning Peak was also the location where many cultivators reached enlightenment and ascended to the heavens. But to most people, the biggest appeal of this incredible mountain where the Holy Sword was forged was its Jincheng Lake. The icy lake at the summit of the peak was frozen over year-round, glimmering as it reflected the light of the rising sun. Legend has it that when Go Chen the Exalted cut open his palm and used his own blood to forge the Holy Sword, a drop fell into the dent at the summit. That drop of blood, yet to be exhausted even after 1,000 years, became Jincheng Lake, its waters so clear one could see to its very bottom. Regardless of whether the legend was true or not, Jincheng Lake's wonders were real. Although it was covered by 3 feet of ice all year round, some few cultivators were able to use the power of their own spiritual core to temporarily thaw the lake. At that time, an ancient mythical beast would leap ashore, holding a weapon in its mouth, and offer it to the person. Xue Meng asked excitedly, "Shizun, what kind of mythical beast came up when you went to get your holy weapon?" Chuaning answered, Kunpeng. Shuemeng's eyes sparkled. Awesome! I can't wait to see a kunpeng. Moran jeered. Don't count your kunpengs before you thaw the lake. What's that supposed to mean? You think I can't thaw a Jincheng lake or something? Moran laughed. Don't get your feathers so ruffled. I said no such thing. Chuaning said, it won't necessarily be a kunpeng. It is said that hundreds of mythical beasts lived inside the lake, guarding the holy weapons. Whichever one takes a fancy to you will be the one to come offer you a weapon it has acquired. Additionally, each mythical beast has its own unique temperament. It will make a request of you. If you cannot complete its request, it will take the weapon and return to the lake. Shuemeng pondered. So that's how it is. Then Shizun, what did the kunpeng request from you? It said it wanted to eat a meat bun, Chuaning replied. The three disciples were silent for a moment, and then broke out into laughter. Shuemeng laughed. You scared me. I almost thought it was something challenging. Chuaning also smiled a little and said, I just got lucky. The requirements these mythical beasts have are very bizarre. They could ask for anything. I once heard of someone who summoned a shishu. That small rat asked him to give it to his wife's hand in marriage. He refused, so the rat took the weapon back and left. In the end, that man never got another opportunity to acquire a holy weapon ever again. Shinmei muttered, That's such a pity. Chuaning glanced at him and said, What is there to pity? Honestly, I respect him for his noble character. Shinmei hurriedly corrected himself. Shizun misunderstands. I didn't mean it that way. Of course, one's wife can't be replaced with even the most powerful weapons. It's just, I think it's a pity that he missed out on such a godly weapon. It's just a rumor anyway, Chuaning said. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see a man like that for myself. Rather, many years ago at Jincheng Lake, what I saw was repulsive things that dirtied my eyes. He paused, as if reminiscing about something, expression darkening as his brows furrowed. Never mind, forget it. These 1,000 years, who knows how many instances of unwavering loyalty this lake had borne witness to, and how many instances of chilling heartlessness. Truly, how many people are even capable of resisting the allure of a holy weapon, of abandoning their chance at advancement, just to stay true to their heart? Huh. Chuaning let out a cold chuckle, as if perturbed by something in his memories, before rearranging his features back into their customary impassiveness. But his brows were knitted just the slightest bit, as if in disgust, and he pressed his lips tightly together, speaking no more of the matter. Shizun, it's said that all of Jincheng Lake's holy weapons have a temper of their own. Was it easy for you to get the hang of yours when you first got it? Shuemeng saw that he looked unhappy and asked him to change the topic. Chuaning raised his eyebrow and said tonelessly, This teacher has 3 holy weapons. Which one are you talking about? The subtle brag. Author's notes. Today's mini-theater is centered around White Cat teacher's last line. This teacher has 3 holy weapons. Which one are you asking about? Expanded through various abridged versions. If this is a school life novel, Discipline Inspector Shuemeng. Class President, I don't know how to correct this question. I remember you had a perfect score. Lend me your test paper and let me have a look. Class President Chuaning raised his eyes, indifferently said, I have 3 tests with perfect score. Which one are you asking about? If this is a CEO novel, second generation rich Shuemeng. CEO Chu, my dad asked me to send this gift to your beachside vacation mansion. Could you let me know your address? Dictatorial CEO Chuaning raised his eyes, indifferently said, I have 3 beachside mansions. Which one are you asking about? If this was a harem novel. Hey. Young Prince Shuemeng. Royal Imperial Uncle, your concubine. She bullied me. She scratched me with her nails while you weren't around. Dissolute Royal Imperial Uncle Chuaning raised his eyes, indifferently said, Oh, this emperor I have 3 concubines. Which one are you asking about? If this is live news, CCT News reporter Shuemeng. Secretary Chu, under your leadership, H City's appearance, citizen happiness level all rapidly advanced. The city water pollution's decreased and the traffic congestion has visibly improved as well. At the award ceremony after G20, Mayor Mo especially gave his approvals and thanks towards your work, and awarded you with Knight's Medal of Honor. Could you show us your medal? Chuaning raised his eyes indifferently said, Comrade, I have 3 medals of honor. Which one are you asking about? If this is Chuaning. Shit, I quit. Have you had enough? You didn't even give me today's lunchbox. Meatbun, the author. Last one. This is the last one. If this is a gourmet food novel. Foodie Shuemeng. Owner, I heard your buns were featured in A Taste of China. And in the 69th Jincheng Lake Cooking Competition, Judge Kunpeng praised it as meat bun that moved the big bird's conscience. Owner, could you tell us what's in the filling? How much is it for 1 steamer basket? Can you give us 1 basket? Chuaning. Human meat, 30,000. No. Meatbun, hey, you need to follow the script. Chuaning raised his eyes, indifferently said, I have school life, CEO, harem, CCTV, 4 scripts. Which one are you asking about? Meatbun, ... I'm sorry I asked. Oh, these theaters are so cute. Meatbun interacting with her characters. So, to recap, in chapter 33, Chuaning woke up and decided to just play it cool. Forget what Moran had said, because he thought that it was actually maybe a dream that he was having. He was super embarrassed. And then, you know, he let his 3 months of probation go on, and then it's time for him to be out of seclusion and isolation, and he is taking his 3 disciples, Moran, Shuemeng, and Shimei, to get a holy weapon, potentially. Hopefully they get something nice, and they're able to please the animal in the pool, and that they receive a weapon from them. I hope you enjoyed. I thoroughly enjoyed that we got a little smooch, a little kiss between Moran and Shizun in chapter 32, and hopefully we get more smooches in the future. Thanks for listening. I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.